these kids that I mentioned, like your son, they were born into a world where they didn't even know Bitcoin didn't exist. They were born after Bitcoin, right? For them, it's perfectly natural to not view Bitcoin as a speculative instrument, but to view it as a tool that is used in the building and creation of their own future tools. So that brings Bitcoin to another level, and they are the elites that will start moving the needle realistically, not the Bezos and the Jeff and the Elon Musk of the world. In fact, I would argue that for Bitcoin really to sort of matter in the world, you and I, our generation has to.
We all say like, oh, Bitcoin changes you. At least for me, it's something about it that gives you this orientation of like, if I f up, I could lose all this. If I do something stupid in this part of my life, I could be sued and lose all this. Like, it does align a personal responsibility and self-sovereignty that does, I believe, make you a better person. But do you see that as like something that Bitcoin is doing to people, or do you like I'm trying to understand, like, how does the protocol interacting with this damn thing that start, for me at least, and I think many people started with, I'm going to make money, and then 2 years later I'm down this rabbit hole and I'm going like, I have to change and fix my whole life. What do you think that was going on there? All right, welcome back to the Byte Federal podcast. I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Aleks Svetski today. He's one of the most articulate philosophical voices in the Bitcoin space that I've ever heard. And Aleks is the founder of Bitcoin Times, the author of the Uncommunist, or co-author, I should say, the Uncommunist Manifesto, and the creator of Satlantis on Nostr. He's a relentless advocate for individual sovereignty and the moral imperative behind Bitcoin. So, Aleks, thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to speak to you today because, quite frankly, I'm just totally sick of talking about price. And I want to talk to somebody who's dug into the philosophy and the why of Bitcoin. So
I appreciate the intro, Paul. Appreciate you getting me on, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I'm really excited that you decided to join. So look, man, let's just jump right in. And one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about is this idea of Bitcoin being more than money, right? Which is, it's right. Everybody, the big adoption curve right now is like this solidification across Wall Street of digital gold. And one time you said it's more than money. Bitcoin is a discovery of truth. So I wonder if you can kind of unpack that for our audience.
Yeah, that was back in my heyday of Bitcoin philosophizing with with the breed loves and stuff of the world. Bitcoin is truth. What can I say to that? I mean, in my latest book, in the Bushido of Bitcoin that I published last year, I talk about how one can best define reality. And I said, that which is most real is that which cannot be rewound or doesn't have like a rewind button or reverse. And I sort of pointed out how, like, the sort of the digital internet, we can delete things and we can make it look like, it never happened, etc. So like there's sort of a lot of virtualization. And, in business, they talk about one-way doors and two-way doors. Like, most things in business are what's called two-way door decisions, where you can make a decision, but you can renege on the decision. You can move back. It's like, it's not the end of the world. There's very few one-way door decisions where you make the decision, you can't go back. And those things are, in my opinion, like, examples of that which is most real. And if the truth is also a reflection of that which is most real, then Bitcoin is both the realest money we've ever had, and sort of a instantiation of what you might call truth. So I don't think that's how I explained it back when I first wrote that tweet or whatever that excerpt was from, but that's how I understand it today. Is truth and reality are kind of like two sides of the same coin, and most other things, most other concepts, most other inventions in the world are somewhat virtual. Everything is sort of somewhere on a spectrum between absolutely real and completely fake. And Bitcoin is certainly on the side of as real as it gets. So yeah, that's my
that That actually added a lot more insight to that quote than what I'd heard you say in the past, and that's really interesting from the idea of how, you know, the winners write the history, and the way a fiat transaction can be reversed, and so many other things that, the way Wikipedia could be completely changed. All these things that, uh, I mean, even like recently Charlie Kirk's assassination, right? I mean, there's the story we were told initially, and is quickly unraveling and becoming something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Or that
Mm-hmm.
was so that's not a one way transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really interesting perspective. I haven't heard Bitcoin described that way, but it makes complete sense to me. So I guess, with that in mind, then this lack of truth, which I think fiat kind of sits at the center of, has had a fairly negative impact on society for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, of
How do
course. I
you do
mean,
you see Bitcoin being this discovery of truth? Do you see Bitcoin? How would you see it remedying some of the negative impacts that we've experienced in a fiat culture?
I mean, I think we all know the answer to that to some degree is that you start to put a price on stupidity again, and you start to put a price on lying, and you start to put a price on fakeness. Um, or at least what I should call a more clear price, right? Because there is still a price. Like we pay for the price of the fiat lies and everything like that, but we pay for it through all sorts of weird negative externalities. So we don't actually know what the price is. Whereas with Bitcoin, the price is a little bit more evident, a little bit more clear because it's a truer instantiation of money. As we said, it's more real. So your feedback loop is much quicker and shorter, which allows for better iteration. Like, and I'm just taking a real, very sort of like systems thinking, logical view of this thing. It's like if a living organism, be that a society, a person, a corporation, an institution of any kind, wants to increase its survivability, it has to be as adaptable as possible. And to be adaptable, you need to be able to take feedback in um, and hope that that feedback is as clear as possible, so that you can make the necessary decision to adapt in the most appropriate way possible. So fiat doesn't allow us to do that very well. Like it allows us to do that to some degree. We still have accounting and profit and loss, and there are businesses that go broke and this and that. But if you look at the larger institutions, governments being the largest beneficiary of the current fiat regime, is that they have no ability to know what's right or wrong. They have no sort of direct feedback loop, and all of this shit gets like lost. And as I said, it becomes these series of externalities that people can't put their finger on as to what's causing all of these problems. Um, I will say though, with a caveat, that it's not as simple as, oh yeah, we just get Bitcoin then everything gets fixed. That shit doesn't work that way either. I think
Hmm.
I think that's probably one of the issues I had with a lot of the over philosophizing in the Bitcoin space over the years, and it's kind of why I sort of took a step back a little bit, because people started exaggerating everything. It's like, oh yeah, Bitcoin will fix everything; it'll make everyone kumbaya, peace and love, and all this sort of shit. I was like, no, that's not doesn't work like that. The nature of reality is that there's always going to be conflict. People are always going to be at each other's throats. Shit always is going to happen. You have diverging IQs. You have diverging sort of ethnicities and cultures and races and all this sort of stuff. And not everyone can just fucking get along. Um, but at the very least, if we have an economic substrate that is sound, that you can't fake, then at least the people who are the cheaters, or the organizations or the groups or the institutions that cheat and fuck up the game and make it difficult for the honest players, at least you kind of take away their oxygen. And what you can do is you can orient society to what I think of as um, kind of pointed more towards excellence.
Hmm.
Like today, we have a society kind of ever obsessed with making everything equal, right? So there's this like obsession with equality and obsession with average and obsession with like bringing down the best of us and all this sort of shit, turning everything into a big fucking gray blob. Whereas Bitcoin kind of is the opposite to that. It orients society towards excellence, and I called it I did a talk in Prague recently where I called Bitcoin a framework for excellence, and that's really what I believe it is. Now, that framework for excellence, it's not equal, and honestly, to a lot of people, it's going to feel unfair and it's going to feel unjust and all this sort of stuff, and it's not pretty, it's not nice, it's not cushy, but it's correct and it's
Mhm.
ascendant. And I think that right there for me is the ultimate upside of Bitcoin is that, we sort of in the fiat realm, if I had to summarize everything I've just said, we lose feedback, we minimize adaptability, which decreases survivability and it just turns everything into a mess. And what it ultimately leads to is like the gray goo molasses of average world, whereas Bitcoin does the opposite. It creates a framework for excellence by increasing the fidelity and the frequency of feedback, and forcing a situation where the best rise, but also the worst get fucking punished. And that's important. Like, punishment is actually important. The lefties won't like that, but I'm sorry, that's what Bitcoin does. So
Mhm.
that's my long answer to your question.
No, that's really cool. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like, and I don't know, I felt this about Bitcoin in my own experience, is that it aligns you to be highly responsible as an individual. When you take on the responsibility of self-custody, you take on the responsibility of, I have to change my life in order to acquire this asset. Those kind of decisions, that independent thought process against so many people telling you it's a scam or a fraud or everything else. Um, I think that's why I feel like we all say like, oh, Bitcoin changes you. At least for me, it's something about it that gives you this orientation of like, if I fuck up, I could lose all this. If I do
Hmm.
something stupid in this part of my life, I could be sued and lose all this. Like, it does align a personal responsibility and self sovereignty that does, I believe, make you a better person. But do you see that as like something that Bitcoin is doing to people, or do you I'm trying to understand, like, how does the protocol interacting with this damn thing that start, for me at least, and I think many people started with, I'm going to make money, and then 2 years later I'm down this rabbit hole and I'm going like, I have to change and fix my whole life.
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think that was going on there?
If you asked a slightly younger Svetsky, I would have said that's all to do with Bitcoin, and that's the experience that everyone has.
Uh
If you ask us, an older, more jaded Svetsky now,
huh.
I actually, I've actually come to find that there's evidence that supports the contrary. I've actually met more people who found Bitcoin and turned into absolute
Hmm.
degenerate monkeys.
Hmm.
Um, so I've come to the conclusion that Bitcoin can have that effect, but I think you actually need the right ingredients. Honestly, man,
Hmm.
I don't think it has the same effect on everyone, and a lot of Bitcoiners don't like to hear this because it flies in the face of the whole Bitcoin fixes everything.
Hmm.
But it actually doesn't. I think you have to have the kind of I don't know. The older I get, the more I appreciate the nature side of the nature nurture equation. I think we've sort of been taught in modern civilization that we can nurture everything. You can train everyone. Everyone can be a libertarian. Everyone should sort of be born with equal rights and all this sort of stuff. But the older I get, the more I realize nature actually has a bigger impact than nature, and sorry, than nurture. Doesn't mean that nurture is not important, but if you don't have the necessary ingredients, like if you're trying to bake a cake and you get like chicken and beef and all that sort of stuff, I don't give a fuck how much you know, of a good cook you are, you're not going to turn that into a cake. It ain't
Hmm.
going to taste like a cake. Or and likewise, vice versa. All these vegans that are trying to create meat out of chemicals and shit. I don't give a fuck how much science you throw at the damn thing. It ain't going to be meat, right?
Hmm.
So, I think the same thing applies to human beings and cultures and everything like that. I think Bitcoin has the ability to unlock this, particularly the virtue of responsibility in people, but it doesn't work on 100% of the people. In fact, it probably doesn't even work on 80% of the people. I've sort of lost hope for most of humanity. Like, I've, I don't know, did you ever read the Remnant series that I did years
Mm-mm.
ago?
I think I did, but I can't bring it back to my attention because I can't remember.
So it was the idea that the remnant are the 20% that make the difference, right? And it
Mm.
was called Bitcoiners of the Remnant, and
Yeah.
it was I riffed off of Albert Nock's essay called Isaiah's Job, which was sort of about this idea of the remnant are like the people who it was a biblical story of like the Isaiah was the prophet whose mission it was to not preach to the masses, but to preach to the 1% who were called the remnant, the ones who had the character to make the difference. And I wrote that Bitcoin is the remnant piece in 2021, and it triggered a whole bunch of people. It was hilarious. Um, and I ended up following it up with two other pieces. The second piece, I talked about how even the remnant has stages. So if the remnant is like 20% of the, and there's another 80% a sheep, then even inside the remnant, there's like 20% of those are what I would call active. And then 20% of those are what I would call the extreme remnant. So it's like, you have basically what that implies is 80% of the remnant are sleeping lions. And they are the ones who will discover Bitcoin and their personality will start to embody some of the principles that Bitcoin has, which are things like responsibility, accountability, excellence, all that sort of stuff. But for the average fucking normie who discovers Bitcoin, no amount of philosophy, no amount of Bitcoin, no amount of self custody is ever going to interest them. It just doesn't fucking matter to them. So my opinion these days is that I just ignore those people and I focus on the ones who are quote unquote the sleeping lions, the ones who we're putting the energy in them actually makes sense. In fact, these days I don't even like I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not online much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do podcasts much anymore, all that sort of stuff, because I just don't like I feel like I've done my piece, I've done
Mm-hmm.
my talking, and now it's sort of time for me to exit out the back side of the stage and go do something else. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that's my thinking on this now. Like I used to think Bitcoin changes you. I think now Bitcoin unlocks a certain subset of people um, because of the nature of how it works. And I think the people it doesn't unlock not going to be unlocked by anything. they,
Yeah,
they are the
that's interesting.
sheeple.
Yeah. Do you think that knowing that, because that sounds completely logical to me, because I'm now experiencing that in this cycle where I came up in Bitcoin listening to you and listening to others talk about the philosophy and the why of Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And in this cycle, this is the first cycle where I've been kind of disappointed with the
Hmm. Hmm.
culture a little bit. And, and so what you're saying resonates with me and makes sense. So, but I'm wondering then if that's the case, right? If adoption continues as it has, and that 80% of the Bitcoin participants don't care if they have self custody, don't care about holding their own keys, and don't even really understand anything about the protocol, never experience that unlocking of personal responsibility, then do you what do you think that means for the protocol long term? Because do you think it has any impact at all? Do you think it's just the nature of Bitcoin and human society?
I think it's just the nature of society and existence. So, there's this sort of misconception that the power is with the people and all this sort of stuff. And we've sort of been fed that shit in school for the last 50, 60 years. When in reality, it's bullshit. It's always the few that make the difference. It's always the elites. And you want your elites to be as naturally elite as possible, which means they're competent, they're they're virtuous, they're excellent. They sort of have these attributes about them. Unfortunately, the modern elites, being very sort of fiat-oriented elites, etc., they're parasitic. They're incompetent. You've got all these you've got these problems with the elite structure. But it's never really the plebs that do anything. It's never really the masses that have made a difference to anything in society. It is always the elite class, and the best you can do is hopefully create a structure where the elites are held to some level of account, so that you have good elites in place and not the parasites. And that's where I sort of come back to Bitcoin. And I think, the libertarian fantasy that, we're all going to be sovereign individuals and everyone is going to respect property rights and all that sort of stuff. I've become really jaded with that idea. I don't think it's going to ever exist, because the long tail of people don't give a fuck. The long tail of people would much prefer certain slavery and certain servitude than uncertain freedom. And it doesn't sound nice, and I don't say that to be a dick, but it's just the truth of the matter, that is what they prefer. So for them, uh, a governance structure or a governance model that is much more like a monarchy, for example, works better. And the monarchy or the monarch is the holder with the most Bitcoin, so they have the most uh, capacity for power projection. They have the most amount of Bitcoin. So they matter the most. Their word matters the most. Their influence matters the most. What they want fucking happens, not the pleb with 2 million sats to his name. He doesn't
Hmm.
fucking matter at the end of the day. So I don't think it changes things. I think what it does is it hopefully, as I said, creates the conditions that start to get rid of the parasitic kinds of elites and gives us a more uh, competent, virtuous elite, um, that is, yeah, hopefully more held into account by the nature of Bitcoin's economic reality, because they can't print the fucking shit.
Hmm.
So then they've actually got to produce something, and these elites are usually the best producers anyway. They are the Elon Musks of the world. They're the Steve Jobs. They are the Jeff Bezos, the guys who can literally bend reality to their whim. Um, we want more of those people,
Hmm.
um, but they're by definition the minority. You can't have a billion Jeff Bezoses, right?
Yeah.
You can have one. So
To a
yeah,
certain
that
extent, some of
I
those
agree for,
people have been the hardest to orange pill too, right?
because they're already elite. They don't
Yeah.
need to be orange. Yeah.
But if we can get there, or I guess actually we'll probably see with the price appreciation of Bitcoin, some new power projectors emerge on the scene, hopefully.
It's going to be our kids. So there's another essay that I wrote in 2023. So I had a bit of a hiatus from writing, and I wrote this one early 2023. It's called The Three Generations Theory.
Mm.
Highly, highly recommend a read of that one. I wrote it for Bitcoin Magazine, and in there I spoke about the first generation of Bitcoin let's call it 2010 to 2030.
Okay.
We're sort of still in that first generation. Um, it is being pioneered by people and some elites with one foot in the old world and one foot in the new world. So by definition, it's a period of time where Bitcoin is comparative. So it's fiat and Bitcoin. So by definition, it's going to be one that is interested more in price and price appreciation and price maturation, because we're living at the nexus. The generation that was born after 2010 and comes of age in the 2030s, your kids now, you mentioned one of them is 20, they are going to become the new elites when they're 28, 30, 35. And that means they'll have had a decade in their 20s to grow up with Bitcoin. Because, this cycle, not this cycle, sorry, this generation, by 2030, Bitcoin should be a couple million. We'll sort of reach cents at parity. It'll have established itself uh, as a money that is broadly accepted around the world, or considered at least a store of value, right? So it'll kind of cross that transition threshold of the speculative phase of the first generation. These kids that I mentioned, like your son, they were born into a world where they didn't even know Bitcoin didn't exist. They were born after Bitcoin, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, for them, it's perfectly natural to not view Bitcoin as a speculative instrument, but to view it as a tool that is used in the building and creation of their own future tools. So that brings Bitcoin to another level, and they are the elites that'll start moving the needle realistically, not the Bezos and the Jeff and the Elon Musk of the world. In fact, I would argue that for Bitcoin really to sort of matter in the world, you and I, our generation has to die. Like
Hmm.
we're the ones that were sort of in the first generation. It's not until really the third generation that it matters, and those will be the elites on a true Bitcoin standard. Not even our
Yeah.
kids; it'll be our children's children. So that's how I think
Is
about
it
it.
so?
And
Does that align with also like the fourth turning concept in your mind?
no, not
Is
really.
it?
No, I
I
think the
mean, the
fourth.
generational turnings at all?
Mm. Yes, somewhat. Although I hate that book so much. Um,
Well, that's an interesting topic.
oh, dude, it's such a poorly written book, and then at the end of it, like the the retarded conclusion of it, it's like, oh well, in order to make sure that the fourth turning comes out okay, we need to partner with NGOs and government institutions to make sure. So I was like, you got to be kidding me!
Hmm.
It was one of the worst books I've ever read. Although that being said, the generational component
Hmm.
is that they're onto something there.
Hmm.
If you want to read a book about cycles, though, go back and read Spengler. These dorks who wrote the Fourth Turning are like fucking kindergarten kids in comparison to Oswald Spengler, who wrote the original sort of treatise on he wrote this book called The Decline of the West. It's like 1,500 pages. The thing's a
Mm.
monster. So you don't have to read that, but any of Spengler's works, if you can get some like summaries and stuff like that, you see someone who, like, I mean, this guy was around in the 1910s, 1920s. He was the OG who wrote about generational cycles, and
Interesting.
civilizational cycles and cultural cycles. Um, so yes, it's somewhat related to the fourth turning stuff, although I think the fourth turning get it completely wrong in terms of where we are, what stage we're at, what maybe not completely wrong. They get some things right, but I think they have no idea where this is actually going. In my
Mm.
opinion, things are going more towards the rise of monarchies, the rise of what I would call CEO kings. In my book, Bushido of Bitcoin, I've got a whole section at the end where I wrote a story putting like kind of it's set in the year 2084, and it looks like what the world it looks like what the world has become in that age. And I kind of lay out this map of executive states which are run basically by CEO kings, against the backdrop of like large blobs of homogeneous CBDC driven macro states. And that's sort of
Mm.
how the world is split up. And I think
Wait,
that's where we're going.
can you clarify that for me? I'm trying to visualize that. So you're saying CEO kings within a larger state. Is that?
No, no, no. CEO king. So like Bukele and Salvador. So you
Hmm.
have like so Salvador becomes a kingdom instead of a fucking country.
Hmm.
Um, and then on the other side, you might have you know, the Eurabia with
Okay.
the capital of New Brussels, right? Where it's like a blob of, you know, Western EU bloc countries that have basically been cucked and, run on their
So in that model,
Euro.
then people are going to have to relocate on their own.
They're gonna have to relocate, and the thing is, in my opinion, what it's going to look like is these CEO, these executive states run by CEO kings will probably form alliances amongst each other. And if you're a citizen of those, you'll be able to move around. Whereas I think the large blobs are going to do everything they can to stop people from exiting from their sort of CBDC fucking, farm slavery farms.
Hmm.
They call legs. So there's a whole thing there. But yeah, I don't know how we got there. Oh yeah, fourth turning. So somewhat aligned with that, but yeah, different conclusion than what they propose.
How do you think Bitcoin would affect governance? Or do you think Bitcoin is going to be sort of the power projection that these CEO kings will use to rise up into power?
I mean,
Like I'm wondering if the people just kind of center on these CEO kings and Bitcoin is just a tool, or if it's something that actually facilitates the emergence of these individuals.
so let's think about what power is. So power is the capacity to channel energy, right?
Okay.
Um, you know, you can do that through channeling energy through kinetic means, so force. You can do it through economic means. Bitcoin. So this is one thing, unfortunately, libertarians always get wrong, and even the Austrian economists. It's like Nietzsche got it really right. Is that what drives humanity and all sort of living sentient creatures is this will to power. It's like this ability to project energy through us to some for some means, no, via some means towards some end. So the Austrians usually talk about human action, but sort of what underlies human action, it is this will to align to project power. So if we sort of start with that, then in my opinion, Bitcoin will be a very effective tool, just like any money would be, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like Bitcoin is just better money in order to do that, right? So if you have 1,000 Bitcoin today, in 20 years, 1,000 Bitcoin is going to make you the equivalent of fucking Elon Musk. So, imagine Elon tomorrow decides to buy Somalia. He could probably turn that into his kingdom, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have these opportunities of these large sort of Bitcoin holders, or maybe a coalition of Bitcoin holders, maybe 10 guys who each have 100 Bitcoin each get together and they're like, all right, we're going to take over this territory because it's been poorly operated for the last fucking 100 years. They're bankrupt. They can't support anything. So maybe they will maybe they'll do it through some mechanism of force. So they'll be like, look, we're gonna, buy a small little fucking mercenary army and go in and take the country. Maybe that's cheaper. Or maybe they buy up key strategic assets, buy up the media, and put a team together and kind of elect themselves as the maybe put one of them as the main CEO king, and they have a board and they operate the country like a company. It makes perfect sense to me. So then they establish some level of sovereignty there. I say all of this sort of like very at the surface level. There's obviously infinite complexity as you infinite complexity as you go down the rabbit hole of what has to happen, and competing, kind of negotiating with existing powers and how you're going to do that, all this sort of shit. But this is where we're headed, in my opinion. So these CEO kings are going to be in a situation where they're more likely to treat the citizenry um, like a business treats a customer, which most of the time is actually good. Some businesses treat their customers really badly, but those businesses either don't last or they're backed by government mandate. Um, or they're big bureaucratic institutions. These new states will probably function more like startups. And startups, if you ever want to get good customer service, man, be a customer of a startup. They will fucking bend over backwards, do all sorts of shit just for you, right? So that's kind of how this will function, in my opinion. So what will necessarily happen is the vote of confidence from the people, quote unquote, will come in the form of more investment, more money, and more of a general voice around that person, which is basically, I'd say Bukele is a prototype of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He came in and his ratings haven't decreased. Like they started high at around 70% or whatever. Now it's like 90+%. And he's come in with basically what one would call an iron fist. I consider Bukele an authoritarian in the best sense of the term. He's the opposite to a totalitarian. A totalitarian is someone like that Keir Starmer wanker in England,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is a bureaucratic middle manager who wants to stick his fingers in everybody's business, and he's completely fucking incompetent. He has no authority, and he makes everything worse. An authoritarian is an authority who has competence, functions like a CEO. Like the best CEOs are the people who find the best people around them to
Mm-hmm.
empower the people around them to create great things. The best CEOs are not fucking micromanagers. They're authoritarians. They create a structure of authority and competence. And that's what someone like Bukele is. And that's what I think the future leaders of these executive states will be like, which is very different to what we have today, which ties back into the idea of strong, virtuous elites versus the parasitic monkeys that are running the show
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yeah, that's really cool. So this in your mind, is this sort of also combined with Balaji's network state concepts?
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
Mm,
I mean, these are the people. These what might be the people, the CEO that decides to start his own network state.
Somewhat, exactly. Balaji's thing is a little bit more, soy and gay and crypto. But
Yeah.
it's and virtual. Like I don't
Mhm.
think in my opinion, I think it's way better to just like go and get 10 Bitcoiners together with 100 Bitcoin each, hire a small army and go and take over like an Eastern European country
Sure.
altogether. Bellagio would be more like, oh, let's build a virtual network state, like a
Mhm.
bunch of dorks. And then maybe one day we'll have a physical space. But anyway, like it's definitely along the same lines. It's
Mhm.
just,
Little different
let's say
vision.
it's the more Bitcoin version, not the crypto version
Mhm. There you
of
go.
that.
That makes sense to me. So, wow, lots to think of there. And that's what do you think? You're thinking 3 generations before we get there.
Yeah,
It's
man, 3 generations. Yeah,
your
that's,
estimation.
and that's yeah, and that's not a long time. It's not a long
No,
time.
it's
Hopefully, you and
it's
I will
too
see
long
it
for
just
me.
before. Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe you and I will be sort of hanging out on our fucking wheelchairs and shit, and be like, "Yeah, we spoke about this in the podcast
Yeah, exactly.
40 years ago."
Yeah, well, you're probably right. I will be shaking my finger saying, "I knew." Um, so let's see here. I guess then, I mean, I really think that that paints a picture of the United States completely breaking up into pieces, right?
100%.
And I mean, we're already seeing Elon has a massive campus in Texas, and employees are living on site, and they're kind of running somewhat of their own governance within
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
district.
Mhm.
You could, there's lots of ideas around like balkanizing the United States. And so just from a selfish perspective, there could be CEO kings of several different districts within this country in
100%.
the near future.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think that like the greatest thing the founding fathers ever did was kind of structure the United States with more state power than federal. And in my opinion, as this reaches its logical conclusion, in the book I talk about it. I talk about the free state of Texas as its
Mm.
own nation state, and then I talk about like this kind of united amalgamation of like the leftist states, kind of Oregon, Seattle, and everything have kind of like come together to be like the Democrat stronghold in the previously what was the United States. Now, whether it happens exactly like that or not, I don't know, but there's certainly like scope for that to happen, and I think that'll be very healthy actually, for
Hmm.
the United States, because the more the if we can kill the the parasite that is the federal government, you'll get way more dynamism out of America,
Hmm.
out of that region for
Yeah, I
sure.
agree.
So I
I
think
agree
that's where it goes.
completely. There's a lot of thought from different parts, different communities that Trump is the last president of the United States. I don't know if you've heard this.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the Caesar equivalent.
Hmm.
I used to think, actually, it's funny. I used to think that during COVID and all this sort of stuff, I was like, okay, America is like going through what was the equivalent of the fall of Rome. I've changed my thinking. I actually think it's 500 years before that. I think it's the fall of the Republic and the rise of the sort of more like the empire of what Rome became afterwards. I think that's a more apt analogy. So America is going to have a second renaissance, but it'll be more decentralized, and it'll be more like less of a sort of this federal blob, and more dynamic and more distributed and more alive, in my opinion. So I think America's going to go through a golden age over the coming years.
So when you say a second empire or a second take on the empire, you see it spreading to through stablecoins? Do you think that's the primary mechanism by which to keep the empire rolling, or are you just saying that it's going to be like a slow decline of empire?
No, because okay, I probably need to think about this more. So I'm gonna just like what I say now. Don't take it as
Hmm.
something that I've actually thought through. But when you had sort of Rome switched from republic to empire, it was sort of like there was a decline, and then there was a massive like boost before the next decline and
Mm.
sort of the end of Rome. So I would say that we've sort of had that first decline, and if Trump is more like a Caesar figure, like the great men of history, there will be, and I don't know if that's is going to be his son or JD or something like that, but some sort of strong figure will come and reunite and kind of like bring the US up again as as sort of like a primary power, but it will get to the point where once again there will be a decline of the empire, but not in a negative sense, but more in the sense that the like sort of with the rise of Bitcoin, and you've got these other sort of forces that are happening at the same time with reinventing governance, with stable coins, with the rise of other sort of localized powers and Bitcoin and all this sort of shit. You'll start to get the conditions whereby the emperor, whoever it is of America in 50, 60, 70 years, um, might cede power to allies within the structure of
Hmm.
this new America.
Interesting.
And as he cedes power to those, they sort of become their own more localized kings. And we get to a stage where like Rome had East and West. They ceded power to Constantinople and to Central Rome, right? Um, in the modern world, we're far more interconnected than obviously Rome ever was. So maybe instead of East and West, like it was with Rome, maybe that is like 10 different primary jurisdictions around the US. That is no longer the US, it's just like
Hmm.
the alliance of American states or something like that.
Yeah. I've been a big believer my whole life of things don't get fixed until they break. And
Mm.
that's one of the things I find hopeful about Trump is his willingness to just break shit.
Fuck yeah, man. Yeah,
And
it's so important.
that's actually, I know a lot of people hate that and it's very disruptive and they hate change. But from my perspective, it gives you
Fuck
the
them.
opportunity to build something great, right? And because otherwise you're dragging these parasites and you're dragging all this corruption and all this malfunctioning governance system around with you forever, and it's just fucking going nowhere. Um, so that has always made me the most hopeful that Trump will just break everything and then we get to rebuild
100%. Totally
it.
agree
Yeah.
with that.
So have you kept up with any? I mean, I know you're focused on Satlantis, but have you kept up with like this core and knots debate at all? No,
Nah,
no,
completely
not
missed it.
thinking about it at all.
No.
Okay.
I mean, what is the TLDR? I guess like all I saw was some tweet of someone saying like, okay, look, I don't know what's going on here, but the core guys look more like leftists, and the
Yeah,
other guys look more like right wingers. So I'm just gonna go
100%.
with the Knots guys. So
That I
when
mean
I saw that, I was like, okay.
that's at the top surface level of it all. You hit the nail on the head, and then you can just drive the value tree down to like how they're looking at the protocol, right?
Hmm.
Like the core side is looking at this like let's just open this thing wide open so that you can put all sorts of data since we can't block spam, so just leave the door wide open and let people do whatever they want. The other side is saying, look, you've got to go as far as to try and filter as much of this stuff out as possible, and how do we do that? Um, and there's the very simple um, rendition right now, I think, of what Knots is doing, which is essentially like just going back in time with Core's original or early software and just adding some filtering to supposedly some talk about like adding some sort of like multi-sig governance to remove spam from the chain. So, and I don't know how much of that is true because Luke has said that a lot of that was taken out of context. So we'll
Hmm.
just see over time. But it is certainly a cultural debate more than a technical debate at this point.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I
Which is
mean,
an interesting, some of us have talked about like, does this lead to a fork war, um, where you get two versions of Bitcoin in X amount of years because it just never gets resolved, right?
yeah, that's I mean, I hope it doesn't fucking get to that, honestly. Like,
Hmm.
fucking I'm tired of this shit. Like, I went through the first fork
Yeah.
wars, and that was confusing enough as it was back then. So,
Hmm.
yeah, unfortunately, I can't give too much useful commentary there.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Um, so tell us about Satlantis and what you're building now and your vision for how that, I mean, I would assume what you're building is meant to interact with this future that you see.
Yeah. So when we first started building Solantis, it was sort of really built for this future. I was, looking at Atlantis as a network state sovereign individual super app. Without getting into all of the details, in the last month and a half, we've actually decided to narrow down the focus actually because
Mm.
the app was becoming too big, too complex, too hard to build, maintain, and ultimately, it was hard to describe what the fuck we were doing. Um, so maybe if we had like 50 million in the account, like we could educate the entire market and kind of establish a really new category of product, which is what it was kind of the goal of what we wanted to do. But resources are resources. You can't do everything. So we we've simplified it basically to make it the first uh, self-serve ticketing platform that's Bitcoin native. So in other words, I don't know if you're familiar with Luma or Eventbrite, but
Eventbrite,
just
yeah.
imagine Eventbrite with Bitcoin native ticketing, with a social layer that's built on Nostr.
Hmm.
Simple, effective. If you're a Bitcoin community running a meetup, if you're a community of any kind running a meetup or an event or any of this shit, Solans is the best place to do it. You go, you create an event, you can create an event in 30 seconds, and you can add Bitcoin ticketing and you can get paid in Bitcoin instantly. No fucking around with Stripe or
Right.
like,
Yeah, because it's using the
getting
Nostr
charged.
protocol.
Exactly. So instead of getting charged like 10% for like Eventbrite charges 10% for ticketing, Luma charges like 7.5%. Everything is a fucking ripoff. So we will start with Bitcoin. We'll add stablecoin because a big part of the global market
Hmm.
wants to be able to do ticketing in stablecoin, and then we'll also even add fiat for people that are just like not interested in Bitcoin because we intend to be a global mainstream events product. And what I want to build here is the first mainstream product that is not a wallet or an exchange or a fucking miner or a treasury company for that matter. That is a Bitcoin company, but just Bitcoin is part of our stack. So we're not going to sort of, kind of like Coinbase. It's very clear that it's a exchange,
Hmm.
even though it's a shitcoin exchange. Like or River or Swan. They're Bitcoin exchanges. We're going to be just the best events app on the planet that supports Bitcoin native ticketing,
Hmm.
and an Nostr social graph. So that's what we're building now, man. So we've kind of
Right.
simplified a bunch of stuff over this month. We're kind of like closing down some of the features and just narrowing down the app and
Hmm.
cleaning up the experience. And yeah, we're partnering with Bitcoin Amsterdam, LaBitConf, adopting Bitcoin and all of this sort of stuff as their official satellite event partner. So all the satellite events that are running around the conference will all be listed on there. Makes it super easy for people to discover, and you can really quickly see, who from your friends are going to which satellite event.
Yeah.
So because that's always a pain in the ass at conferences, like trying
Uh-huh.
to figure out, hey, you going to this one, that one, which one, what the
Hmm.
fuck. So it like makes that super simple, and makes it easy for anyone who actually wants to host an event to just like create it and get paid in Sats like straight away. No bullshit. So it's really good.
Yeah, that's really a good idea. That I like that simplification of that. Is it uh, the idea of using fiat and stable coins, is that the idea to really like kind of move into the mass market also to get, I mean, and then I'm thinking like, how do those people in the mass market that have never uh, dealt with public private key pairs, how do they get into Noster and have that experience?
Yeah. So
Like you simplify that for them or?
yeah, we're fully custodial, so we're not like I would call us a cypherpunk product.
Hmm.
You can use it like in time we'll make it so that cypherpunks can use it. So like you can bring your own Nostr key. You can even create your own Nostr key if you want on the device, and it's all stored there. But for most people, You can sign up with email, Google SSO or Apple SSO, and we store the keys for you,
Ah,
and you
gotcha.
can extract them in the future, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you get on Nostr without even knowing that you're on Nostr,
Right.
and then likewise with the wallet, we do kind of similar to Primal. So we it's a custodial wallet. Primal uses Strike, we're using Ibex, and you have your wallet balance on there. And if you are someone who wants to withdraw, by all means, go for it. Bitcoin will be the cheapest ticketing, so that way, like if someone is running a ticketed event, they can do fiat if they want when we integrate Stripe, but that'll be like 5% fees,
Yeah.
and they'll have to choose to pass that on or to eat it. But if they see Bitcoin at like 0.5% or 1%, they're gonna be like, "Fuck, maybe I should try this Bitcoin thing out."
Yeah.
And then you know, we
But
slowly
will
start to
there ever
onboard
be a
more.
mechanism within the wallet to acquire Bitcoin?
Maybe that kind of moves us back into the exchange
Yeah.
territory, and I
Yeah.
kind of want to avoid like that was something I banged my head against the wall with for years when I was doing Amber, and I kind of promised myself that I would never get into financial services again
You're
because
right. But you
fuck
could
that
just
stuff.
maybe point them to like, go there, buy Bitcoin, come back.
We could, or unless our partner sort of offers that solution and we kind of become the kind of like a layer on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's sort of like a maybe. Like
Mm-hmm.
mainly, I want to create the ability for somebody because since sort of like the scamdemic and all of that sort of stuff finished, there's been a massive surge in people trying to do offline events. Like there is so much more events happening, small events, conferences, retreats, this, that. Like people are craving
In the Bitcoin
meeting in real
space
life.
or in
Not just in the
every
business space,
space. Okay.
everything, dude. Massive. Like everyone is trying to get together in real life now. Um, it's because we got locked in our fucking houses for 2, 3 years, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants that, but then also that is being further reinforced by the fact that the online world is just turning into slop. Like there's
Yeah.
AI shit everywhere.
Right.
Everything is fucking hysteria and politics and noise. So it's like people want to go out and touch grass and like meet people and do stuff. So the events industry, in my opinion, is going to grow like crazy over the next decade and even longer, right? So you've got sort of the whiplash effect from COVID, but then you have the sort of the slopification of the internet, sort of driving this desire to meet and connect in real life. So, one of our slogans we were messing around with it today was, connection in a world of disconnection. Sort
Mm-hmm.
of, online connected us, but now we feel ever more disconnected online. So it's like we want to meet in person.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
if
because
the
with
Bitcoin,
these like with the current social apps that are out there, you can't keep that shit out. Like
no, you can't.
you can't curate your experience, and they're constantly going to trigger you and and try and get you to interact with it. Which is one of the things that I really appreciate about Noster, right? Is that it's not triggering. There's no algorithm that's like I'm gonna piss Paul off so he sits here and rage tweets for an hour, right? So
Well,
it's yeah,
yet.
it's
I
yes,
don't actually believe Nostr is inherently immune to that either, though.
really.
No, I don't think it is. No, because the thing is, like these algorithms prey on, and they inadvertently prey. I don't think it's all just a conspiracy. Some of it is, but they inadvertently prey on the human limbic system, which is we are biologically geared towards danger and hysteria more than we are towards just the blase stuff, which is why Nostr is somewhat like tapered off. It's not growing like it was before, and like the numbers are kind of steady state. They're increasing a little bit, but certainly not to the degree that the products are increasing. So for us, like we've sort of, this is another part of our refinement of our product is, we had a Nostr feed and all this sort of stuff in our app. We're deprecating that as well. We're like for us, the Nostr element is being able to surface information like, oh, this friend, if I'm coming to a conference, oh, Paul's going to this one, or surface events that people like you are interested in, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to a feed of more content. Because I'm actually skeptical that Nostr is going to get any decent amount of social content traction in the next 5 or 10 years, because it's just not engaging enough. It's not engaging enough. That doesn't do enough to
But you're going to be using the platform to actually solve a practical
correct.
application, which
Yes,
is users coming regardless of whether it's Nostr or not.
exactly,
Just works
exactly. So that's
better. and
Yeah,
that will drive traffic. So, is there any other builders looking at Nostr the way you are to use
I
that
don't know.
platform? Yeah.
It doesn't seem so. And I've had a bit of you know me, I like to sort of drop these bombs and piss people
Mm-hmm.
off. So, you know, I wrote an article a little while ago called you know, Nostr Unpopular Opinions. And in there I kind of said, look, Nostr already lost the censorship resistant battle. Like, as much as it is technically more censorship resistant than Bumble, X, or Substack, um, Bumble, X, and sorry, not Bumble, fucking Rumble, Jesus Christ, Rumble, X, and Substack fill the mind space in people's heads for censorship resistance. So Nostr
Mm,
lost that battle. It's fucking too late now. Like,
mm,
so it missed
gotcha.
that boat. So to me, I sort of made this whole song and dance on an essay about it, and a bunch of people got pissed off. They're like, "Oh, you're just a naysayer. You don't understand how Nostr works." And I'm like, "No, no, I actually do understand how it works, dude. I'm just telling you that people don't fucking care." So my position on Nostr is that I'm going to use it in our business as a tool, as part of the stack. And that tool for me is giving you social context for events. That's it. Not for content and posting and, you know, trying to
Hmm.
attract content creators from all around the world. It's too fucking hard, man. Like, we
Yeah.
spent like the last 6 months trying to do that. And, you know, we would content creators were interested. They started posting, but because there's no algorithm, there's no growth. You know, so that 3 months later in posting, they're still on 30 followers, whereas on Instagram, they've got fucking 250,000 followers. Where do you think they're hanging around?
Yeah. Exactly.
They don't have to stick around on Nostr. So it's like, so I think the content battle is just too hard, at least for us. I mean, maybe Primal can pull something off there. Maybe one of these other guys can. But for me, I just view, I kind of look at Nostr as a protocol where I can have social as a service and I can plug it into my app. But my app is not a Nostr app, it is an events app.
Hmm.
It just happens to get social context from this open social layer called Nostr,
Yeah,
and it
that makes
happens to
sense.
do Bitcoin payments. So it's a
Yeah.
switch in understanding how to use it.
Yeah, it provides a whole lot of the tools that you would otherwise bolt into a social app.
Correct. I'd have to build my own social graph, or I can plug in Noster's Web of Trust in social graph.
Right.
So that's how I'm using it. So I'm being very objective about how I'm perceiving Noster, and that's another sort of criticism I had of the space is that people have sort of conflated the importance of Nostr with the importance of Bitcoin. I see them as two different things. You know, if Bitcoin fails, the world is fucked. Like, we're up shit creek without a paddle, and there is no reinventing Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin was a
Right.
0 to 1 moment. So I would argue that Bitcoin, the implementation, is more important than Bitcoin, the idea. Because Bitcoin, the idea, has been replicated 50,000 times. That's what all the shitcoins are, right?
Hmm.
So it's like Bitcoin, the implementation is more important. The implementation that you can trace back to the Genesis block, you
Hmm.
know, what your fucking node runs, that is Bitcoin. Nostr, on the other hand, the idea is more important than the implementation. It's the opposite way around. If Nostr fails tomorrow, what did we lose? Some fucking content. Content is worth zero in the world. It doesn't fucking matter. And maybe a couple of people lost their reputation because they had a follower graph or something. But who gives a fuck? Your reputation is more associated to you anyway. So you could go on the next social graph and build it there again. So it doesn't really matter. So it's like the value of losing Nostr tomorrow is basically negligible. But the idea of Nostr, which is a social layer on the web where people have public private keys and they can own their identity, and the identity, the social graph, lives on the web, not inside a silo like Facebook or Twitter. That idea is very important. So if Nostr is not the one that succeeds, that's fine. Maybe the next um, social protocol is the one that succeeds, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm very agnostic in that sense.
Hmm.
Whereas on the flip side, I'm a total Bitcoin maximalist, because if Bitcoin fails, if that implementation fails, the world is going to be in a fucking in for a massive hurt. And once again, that pissed off a lot of Nostr people,
Can
unfortunately.
we talk about that a little bit about like how you would see Bitcoin failing? Like what would indicate to you that Bitcoin is failing?
That I don't know. I mean, I'm maybe a little bit more naively bullish there, that I think it's won already,
Hmm.
and that the world is just catching up. Um, I mean, the only real indication of Bitcoin failing is that the price continually falls to zero. That's I
So
mean,
you would
maybe
say
there's
one of the signs of winning to you would be that we get less volatility over
there's
time.
more economic mass over time.
Mm-hmm.
More economic mass. So that's definitely an indicator. That's definitely a sign. I would say, yeah, I'm not versed enough to comment on the sort of the spam side of things and whether that stuff ultimately, because ultimately, like, whether that stuff brings more economic activity or not is a question mark. Because, you know, I guess on one side, someone like in the Knots camp might say, look, it might, like, opening up Bitcoin might bring more short-term economic activity, but at the expense of long-term economic activity, because it's no longer money, it is now a fucking virtual machine.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think the people on the other side of the spectrum will be like, yeah, by opening it up, we get more economic activity, which increases the chances of Bitcoin success. But maybe they're not thinking about the longer term. What are the ramifications of doing this now?
Right.
And does this create the conditions where Bitcoin actually doesn't perform as well as money, but it becomes more of a virtual machine or some sort of technical tool? And what is the cost of that long term?
Yeah.
So, you know,
And this is
maybe there's
actually
something
you
there.
kind of, without knowing, you just kind of hit the crux of it, in that they want to open up. I forget the term. The op return, I think, is the part of the protocol where there's so much data that you can put in there, and right now I think it's like 80 bytes or something. And you know, in order to get more capacity, they could say, hey, we'll double it and see what happens. But they're not saying let's just take it to 160. They're saying let's just open it wide open and allow for 100,000. So it's such a massive just door opening to non-monetary transactions coming out of the chain that is like, why can't we just say, hey, let's try a little bit more, let's just double it and see what happens. And that this is where the culture war is starting, between saying you know, that's a reasonable and logical next step, and before we go full on, let's see if there are second order effects that we're not aware of or hadn't considered. And they're just saying no, like, you can't stop us, so we might as well just open it wide and go 100,000. And that's what's creating the massive conflict. And there's so many that people on the not side and in the middle are saying, like, why can't we just be reasonable about this? Why do you have to be so adamant about, like, just going against what, say, X% of the community thinks is a risk? Not even taking that into consideration seems, and not having a good reason, because the protocol is working fine with 80. Not having any good reason makes everybody a little bit suspicious as to what's the purpose of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why, yeah, my gut instinct is sort of to be on the side of Knots because of that. It's like, I mean, I'm usually one of the, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of guys when it comes to something like Bitcoin. When it comes to everything else, I'm a fucking tinkerer and tamperer, dude. I fucking break so many things just because I'm an idiot. But in this case, sort of prefer to take the cautious approach.
Yeah, we're talking about massive amounts of money for everybody.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Aleks, this has been an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, it was a good one, actually. Yeah, haven't had a good chat like this for a while, actually. And
That's cool. Anytime you want to come back, buddy. Whereas I always appreciate your broad depth of knowledge, all the reading you've done. We need more brains like you in Bitcoin, people that can help guide the culture and the philosophy. I think it's a lost art, at least in this cycle. I'm hopeful it comes back, because hearing from thinkers like yourself help align us on our path. So, you know, if we're the sleeping lions, we need the activist in the front, willing to rip some heads off every once in a while. So I appreciate that.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.